So I asked you, who are you? You said you are the oldest child.
Yes.
From a black family in the south suburbs.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So who I am, my day job is in sales. I'm in technology sales. I sell for an IT company. We do hardware, software, application development. I also am a man in recovery, and I will be coming up on 7 years of free from alcohol and gambling.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I am a dad. My son is actually he just turned 7. So I got sober the same year he was born, 5 weeks after he was born, which is awesome. I am a initiated man. I have gone through the Mankind Project August of 2018. Ashe. And I actually because I couldn't get enough, I did another group, Victories, and I got initiated through that. And so I've had these men's weekends, and they were phenomenal, both life-changing in their own right. Most importantly, I think, I'm a man of faith, of spirituality. I believe in God. I believe that there is a power greater than ourselves, spirit of the universe. I grew up in a Christian home, so I have a lot of Christian dogma in my background, but my God is bigger than American Christianity. And so American Christianity kept black people in slavery, and white people used the Bible for their own gain. So my Christianity is way bigger than American Christianity. So
I'm guessing that's not a lesson you learned in church. Where did you learn that?
I've learned that through my own studies, through theology reading, through understanding how history. I love and thirst for knowledge. So something that I'm a book nerd, but I'm also a marathoner. I love sports, but I enjoyed understanding the process or learning about something new. And I tend to gravitate towards philosophy and some psychology, but philosophy and history, theology. I've always been bent towards that. Whereas other people have science or whatever their thing that they favor to want to learn more about. The study of being, if you will. So yeah. So I'm a lot of things. And tonight I'm here with you, having a conversation.
Right on. Yeah. So tell me about where you grew up.
So I grew up was born at St. Joseph's Hospital, which I think is now St. Joseph President's Hospital up by DePaul University.
Okay, so on the north side of Chicago.
I was born on the north side, but I was raised on the south side all of my childhood.
Okay.
First in the neighborhood north of Beverly. So we lived at 8201 Hamilton, which was off of Damon, and we went to this church called Emmanuel Baptist Church. Well, Reverend L.K. Curry was the pastor for 40 some odd years. And that church was founded in 1974. I was born in 76. My parents went just after it was open in 74. And so I was a South Sider. And then we moved out to the south suburbs. And so in the South Burbs, I grew up in this little town called Glenwood. It's nestled between Linwood and Homewood, about 2 miles from the state border. So we used to go to Indiana for gas a lot.
Okay. So how old were you when you moved from the South Side to the South Suburbs?
6 years old.
Okay.
Yes.
So do you remember life on the South Side of Chicago?
Yes.
You do?
Yes.
Yeah, what do you remember from that time?
I had a couple of friends that grew up down the street. They were similar in age.
Okay.
Carl and Kim. They were same age as my sister and I. Actually, Carl was a year older than me, but we were in the same grade because he was, he had an November birthday. And then Kim was, I think, a year older than my sister Valerie.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I had friends on the street, and then my parents sent us to Emmanuel at the time, had a Christian school. So I went there for preschool and kindergarten.
And what were the racial demographics like on the South Side?
About 90% African American.
90%. And the other 10%?
they were 90% of my neighborhood. If you went a little further south than Beverly, Beverly was still pretty multiracial, majority Southside Irish, if you will, in Beverly. But my neighborhood was predominantly black.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
and when you think back to that time being a little boy in a mostly black neighborhood, what comes up for you?
at that time, it was joy. It was happiness. I mean, there were kids around the block that we all played together. I remember, I didn't feel like I was, I felt comfortable in my own skin. I do remember an incident where I mistakenly hit a girl with the bat. And I remember that being like, I was like, I don't know why I did that. Like, I was like 4 or 5 years old. She was crying. I was scared. My dad spanked me. My parents believed in spanking. I don't spank my son, but that's another topic. It's another conversation. But they spanked me, and I remember consciously thinking like, ooh, I don't want to do those types of things to get in trouble like that. Right. So from that point on, I tried to minimize my getting into trouble with things. And yet I had these things that I could be sneaky about, like all humans can be, right? But I didn't get into trouble. I got one detention in high school and maybe 1 or 2 detentions in grade school.
Got it.
So, so that incident woke me to the fact that, there's consequences. And then being the only black child, or being not only, but rather being one of many African-American kids in the neighborhood, I was pretty comfortable in my own skin at 5-6 years old. Got it. But it got different in Glenwood.
Yeah. So what happened then?
So when we moved to Glenwood, I was in my first grade, and it was a multicultural neighborhood in the sense that we had Beth Yin from Asia. I think she was Chinese descent. We had a kid from Turkey. We had a couple of Latino kids, and then there was about 10 to 15 African-American kids per classroom. So
about half.
Yeah. So maybe half or just under half were African-American kids that I went to first grade with, and from there on, if you will. So
got it.
So I grew up in a multicultural environment to the best of the South suburban ability. But I'm grateful that I had exposure to white friends at an early age in first grade.
So what do you mean by that, to the best of the South suburban ability?
I mean that, and actually if you do studies, Park Forest was City of Park Forest was very conscious about moving in multicultural diversity in its city. Whereas Glenwood, I think it just was by osmosis, right? African Americans wanted to migrate to nicer homes, be out of the city, not have to pay parking, all those things. And so it just kind of naturally flowed that people moved into Glenwood, compared to Park Forest being very progressive about, we want people from all races to be represented in our community. So that's what I mean, to the best of its abilities.
And as a kid, did you feel that?
That feel welcome, you mean? Or what? I mean, yeah, as a kid, Kenny Simmons was my best friend.
Kenny Simmons?
Kenny Simmons. He was a white kid.
Okay.
From
you say Glenwood. Kenny Simmons like I know him. I don't know Kenny Simmons.
Okay, so he was the first kid that welcomed me to the new area. It was a new school. I'm sure I had anxiety and fears around being a new kid. It wasn't a Emmanuel Christian school where all the kids were black and the teachers were black and they were teaching Christian principles. I was at public school, right? I'm using quotations that people can't see it. I guess maybe they can. But, so I was at this public school, and it was, 60% white, 30% black or 20% black, and then, about 10% other. And Kenny Simmons became my best friend. And I will tell you what was interesting, Josh. My parents said to me, and let me back up. So I am a child of a musician. My dad played drums with Buddy Guy.
Wow.
In Chicago in the 60s.
Amazing.
Right?
Yeah.
And my middle name is Charles Kenyatta. So my middle name comes from him and Buddy going to Kenya and touring in Kenya. And when he came back, he convinced my mom to name their first child Charles Kenyatta.
Wow.
And my dad's name is Charles, so I'm like the seventh Charles in my family, but the third in my lineage. So my grandfather, Charles Price, my dad, and now me. We stopped out my son. His name's Lincoln. But what was interesting about my parents' take on me being friends with Kenny Simmons was they said, you will be friends with him now, but his parents will teach him that black people are not to be friends with. That it's okay to be friends with them at a little younger age, but you're not going to be long-term friends with him. And so from a very early stage, this podcast, we're talking about race and racism. I learned from a very early age that I was different from my white friends, that I was not going to be looked upon as equal, perhaps. And as a matter of fact, my dad drove that home a lot as a black man. He drove home this...
That you're not going to be seen as an equal.
As an equal. He drove home that I had to outthink, out-hustle, outsmart, and be better than just to be counted for. And even when I got there, I still wouldn't be able to have a seat at the table. And so he raised me, and he's a brilliant man. And he, his tools were, he grew up in Mississippi in the 50s and 60s. My mom grew up in Shreveport, Louisiana in the 50s and 60s. They both migrated. We've heard about the Great Migration to Chicago, Detroit, New York. My parents are two of the people that came to Chicago in the late 60s. They've been here 50 years now.
Wow. And they must have came right to the South Side.
They went to the South Side. As a matter of fact, what's really cool about my parents? They met on the Red Line. My dad saw my mom. He's like, I got to ask her
That's
out.
the one.
And they've been together. It'll be 50 years next August, God willing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Incredible.
That's pretty cool. 50 years marriage is not the norm.
That's no joke.
Yes.
So how do you feel about your dad saying that to you?
It was hard. It
was hard at that time?
It was hard as a kid to it threw me in a self-image crisis. It threw me in a self-worth crisis. And I didn't know how to explain that at the time.
What is a self-worth crisis?
My worth is predicated on how much I do externally, how many praises I get for A's and B's, how hard I work, how well-mannered a kid I am, how I work my ass off to not be looked upon as, this stupid nigger, right? This insignificant, like, whatever. And I don't mean to drop the N-word, but I'm just like, that's the thought process that we were taught to not be, be viewed by the white man as this, throwaway, black person, this throwaway colored person, right? And so my dad instilled in me that I had to work really hard to get whatever I wanted out of life, and then some, to prove my worth, to sit at the table. And that was in pound. I mean, there was a time where he said I came home with 3 A's and 3 B's in the 6th grade. And I was very proud of that. First time I had no C's on my report card. Right. And I worked my ass off for that. I'm not, my intellect, I'm not a high IQ person. I'm probably above average, about average or above average, but I worked my tail off. Right. And I was so saddened that he was disappointed. He was disappointed that I had gotten 3 A's and 3 B's. And he said, well, it might be okay for other families to have 3 A's and 3 B's, but in my house, my children get all A's. And I'm thinking, you didn't graduate college, dude. How are you going to tell me to get all A's when you didn't finish what you started? You left Jackson State to go play drums, and he did well for himself, but, he didn't finish college. So I had, from a very young age, my worth was based on my accomplishments. That's what I was trying to say. Or my worth was based on the amount of success I had to the world. And I hustled really hard to do that, to live up to that for a long, long time. Until about 15 months ago. Yeah.
Well, I want to get to that in a minute here about what happened 15 months ago.
Yeah.
So this, your dad saying that not, what I hear is not good enough.
Not good enough, exactly.
Yeah. When you were feeling so proud, how did that impact you?
So interesting enough, I never got 3 A's or 3 B's again. I never really focused on school after that. I made a conscious decision at 12 years old that I was going to focus on sports, music, and that if I couldn't make the grade, then F him, screw him. I'm going to do what I care to do.
I see.
And I literally took years to overcome, that decision.
As a big decision to make.
And you'd be surprised at the decisions we make as kids.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So your dad was trying to prepare you to be a successful black man.
Yes. He wanted me to be Thurgood Marshall, right?
I see.
The ability to eat, as he says, to eat collard greens and fried pork chop and cut it up with, the African Americans, blacks in the community, and be able to sit at the white man's table and talk law. So my dad worked for law. So after he left the music career, he worked for law firms. And in that, he worked in the copy room, and he really elevated himself. My dad, his great, he's always been able to pull himself out of situations by willpower. And so he was trying to instill that to me.
Right.
Right. And I totally appreciate it, because it's how I finished 3 marathons, right? By willpower and a little luck probably too. But Mike, to answer your question, he was trying to help me set the table for how to be successful on the world stage, if you will. Right. And he, again, to the best of his ability.
So when you were a teenager during this time, how did you feel about being black? I mean, from what you share, I hear that you were, it was, obviously you knew you were black. Yes. How did you feel about it?
Resentful, angry.
Towards
God.
Towards God.
Towards God. Towards society as a whole for how they treated black people.
Why towards God?
Well, you got to remember, it was a Baptist home. We grew up, I went to Baptist church, and then I went to Catholic high school, which was a whole nother. And so I had religion being fed down my throat of God is sovereign, God is love, God is all these things. And I'm thinking, well, if God is all these things, why the hell did you make Jews and blacks and Latinos and other people less than the superior race of white men? Right. And I had a resentment for a long time, for 20 some odd, almost 30 years, of why would God make us the lesser group in society? Because that's the programming I got from my dad and my mom and other African American communities. I'll give you an example, Josh. In 1983, we were in Jackson, Mississippi for a reunion, family reunion. We went to the Holiday Inn. It was a nice Holiday Inn. I was 6-7 years old. I'm sorry, 1987. So I was 11 years old. And we went to this Holiday Inn in Jackson. And there was a janitor, custodian man there, custodial person there, African American, probably in his 50s. He was gray hair, so 50s or 60s. And he says, "Boy, what you doing here? You're not supposed to be here." I said, "Sir, our room is right upstairs." He was not used to African Americans staying in this Holiday Inn on the nicer side of town. But my dad was also a small business owner. After he left those law firms, he started his own business. He made really good money back in the 80s. So we could stay where the hell we wanted for the most part, especially in Jackson, Mississippi. We could stay at a Holiday Inn. And that wasn't, we've stayed at 5-star hotels, right? But we stayed at the Holiday Inn. And yet this African American, this black man tells me I'm not supposed to be there. So it's not just my parents telling me I'm not supposed to, I don't measure up, or that I have to work hard to measure up. I get the programming from society as a whole, or from people locally. And the stories, I could go on about that. So if you want.
Well, the 2 stories you shared so far are from black men.
Yes.
Black men are so far at least have been the 2 people who gave you, your father and this janitor, the message of
you got to measure up.
You got to measure up.
Yes.
What kind of messages did you get from white folks?
That's an interesting one, because I don't think I never got negative messages. Not a lot of negative messages early on.
Yeah.
I got, so I think I was, when I did testing, I'm a visual learner, and I'm not an auditory or some person, kinetic, right? I'm a visual. I have to see things, and I learn by seeing. So anytime I received tests and it was either audio or, we had to like use our hands for it, I didn't test well at that. But if they did it out of the book, I would test well. So for me, the way I related to white people is they were saying I was dumb because they were always, in the beginning, in my early childhood, second, third, fourth, and fifth grade, they would have me in remedial classes. Not like I wasn't dumb, but I was in the B class, not the A class. And so I got this image, and I don't think it was necessarily them being white that they were doing this. It was just that I internalized it as these white teachers think that I'm not going to make the grade, because not all of them understood my learning. I wouldn't say disability, but my learning skill, my ability to learn. Whereas and the classes that were visual, I did great. The classes that it was all lecture, I didn't do so well.
I see.
Yeah. But what I took from that is that they think we're dumb too. Right. I made that story up.
Black kids?
We black kids are dumb too, except for a few smart black kids.
So
right.
There's kind of these different categories.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the default is
that black people are stupid.
I see.
Is what I took away from that.
Yeah. And do you see that as consistent with what your dad was trying to tell you about how white folks do?
I think I made some judgments that they were not giving us a fair shot. That perhaps maybe they were just, dismissing us just because of whatever views they had about black men or black boys at the time.
And do you still see it that way?
In pockets around the country. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I think that there are parts of the country where whites dismiss blacks unintentionally. They just they're not even conscious of the dismissal that's occurring.
When you say, can you give an example of what of something you've seen?
I give you a personal example.
Please.
So in 2009, almost 10 years ago, in December of 2009, I was at a local Borders bookstore. Borders closed, right? They were a bookstore and they had a cafe, right? And I went into Borders and I bought a $2 coffee and gave the cash register a $100 bill, right?
Got it.
She said, "Oh, we don't use the marker. I just have to have my manager verify this bill." The manager comes over to the cashier, looks at the bill, looks at me, looks at the bill, whispers in her ear whatever he whispered in her ear. She got me to stay there. She kept the $100 bill, and then and told me I could sit down in the cafe area. Mind you, I'm reading like triathlon magazines. I have a sweatshirt on that says "We'll Run for Chocolate." I'm wearing jeans. I'm not looking like this, whatever image they might have of black people, right? And this is where I mean by dismiss. He calls the Wheaton police. I live in Wheaton. He calls the Wheaton police. They come in. They ask me about the $100 bill. I tell them, well, it came from the bank. It came from Chase Bank. I don't know what, They arrested me, took me out of Wheaton, out of the Borders, took me to the Wheaton police station, verified the bill, and then said, "Oh, Mr. Hicks, I'm really, really sorry. We've had people have been passing fake $100 bills in the strip area, in the strip mall area. And so, you fit the description, so we had to verify it, right?" So what I mean by dismissing, or in this instance, preconceived judgments or cognitive bias, I've heard that word used, right? This manager had a bias towards me, right? And so to connect them, my parents told me that could happen, that people would dismiss, have have bias, prejudices, and they would just, not even think twice. And that was the first time that ever happened to me. And I was 33 years old, and I was floored because I had gone on to mostly white high schools, white colleges. I had dated white women. And so I had really assimilated into like white culture living in the Western burbs. And yet me living in white culture and Western burbs, going to white churches, trying to worship a God and do right by my neighbors. Here I am, being presumed guilty until proven innocent.
So that came at age 33.
Yes.
And it was a big shock.
It was huge because I had only heard about it.
Right.
And in the times I had heard about it, I had softened the blow for my white friends. Like, oh, well, you guys aren't like that. Or, oh, well, I wish some black men would just pull their pants up and they should act right. Right. I had gone on this track of, and because of my pastor, Reverend L.K. Curry, he said, black men don't need to wear earrings. It's like being a slave again. Black people shouldn't wear earrings. I had a lot of different programming from Christianity, from my parents, that if I wanted to be counted on, be respected, I had to walk a certain way, talk a certain way, act a certain way. Yeah.
And what kind of way, how would you describe that way?
Like the white man.
Like the white man.
Wear wingtip shoes, a good solid blue suit, wear a white shirt, wear a nice tie, not tie, not. Till this day, I never wear orange.
You never wear orange?
I never wear orange.
Was that part of the programming, not to wear orange?
It was part of don't be too loud and obnoxious. Right? Be conservative. Don't be made fun of when you go out in public.
And have you inhibited yourself besides not wearing orange?
I do wear purple. So I do wear, certain clothes, but yes, I've moved away from that stereotype, if you will, like don't, or not stereotype. I've moved away from, the programming to live my life, right? To be consciously woke and whatever that I want to do.
So in talking with other black men, I hear stories like the one you told that happened in the borders. Happen all the time.
Sure.
All the time. And I'm curious why you think it didn't happen to you until age 33.
Well, so part of the other programming. So what we oftentimes don't talk about within the black community, in my opinion, my estimation is that colorism, right? There's racism and then there's colorism.
What's colorism?
I don't have a Webster dictionary about it, but
What's the Charles Hicks definition.
It is the dismissal or being snooty or holding your head up, thinking you're better than, or that they're worse than, by the lighter they are to the darker they are. So if you're a light-skinned black person and you're a little bit closer to the master, if you got a touch of the master, that's a saying in the black community, right? It means that your great-great-grandparents were integrated with their white slave masters, or somebody in the family married a white person. If you've got a touch of the master, then in your light-skinned complexion, you are more accepted in the white community compared to if you're dark skinned, and I'm pretty dark, African American, a dark black guy. So first off, you will be considered a field slave, right? Because they couldn't see you in the plantation home, so they had all the really dark black slaves in the plantation, and the lighter skin or the more appealing slaves would be in the house, right? I mean, that's stuff we talked about in the African American in my own home. My parents said, because you're a darker skinned black kid, you're gonna be picked on, and I was actually picked on. We didn't even talk about the whole why I migrated, or not migrated, why I integrated with white kids, because I got picked on for being darker
by other black kids.
That's colorism.
Got it.
Black kids picking on other black kids just for the darker pigmentation. And I had a lot of pain around that. I was called names like Blackie, Charco, Oreo, because I had white friends. So they say you're black on the outside, but you're white on the inside. Yeah. I got called Zebra, Shaka Zulu. Really, really mean.
These are by other black kids?
Other black kids in 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade.
Yeah.
Until we outgrew it. And it left some severe scars.
I see.
Yeah.
So, hearing your story, it sounds like it was easier to be around white folks.
It was just different. And then if you were, had your own characteristics about you, funny, or, I'm an extrovert, so I like being around people. So to have my black friends say these hurtful things was really hard. And then, and my love language is quality time. I like spending time with people, and I like being around people. I get energy from being around people, right? So by the time I got to high school and I had kids in band that I was practicing, I played drums in high school, and it just became easier. It became a lot easier to hang out with my white friends. By sophomore year, I was pretty much had majority white friends and minimal African-American black friends.
And there were black kids around.
There were black kids at Marion, yeah.
Got
I went to Marion Catholic High School. There were black kids at Marion, yes. Yeah. And I was friends with them. I got my license, and I'd be driving around one of, it'd be 5 of us black. But I told the line of keeping black friends. I was doing what my dad had suggested. Walk with the white friends, keep your black friends, right? Be able to cut it up meaning make laugh, joke, fun, be silly, right, with your black friends, and be able to assimilate with your white friends.
Yeah.
And so I, listened to Nirvana and Pearl Jam and Dave Matthews and all these bands that I got introduced to in the early 90s.
Yeah.
That I was not listening
and
to.
And did you
in
enjoy
the
those bands?
And I started liking them.
Yeah.
I'm a music person anyway. I played drums like my dad. I played drums in high school. We played classical music, and we did the jazz band and pep band for baseball or for basketball games. And so I really had, and one of the things I would say is I had a pretty big appetite for learning and exploring. And so the assimilation for me to have majority white friends was not as hard as it might have been for African-American kids who felt like they got pushed behind or left behind by their black friends, and all they had were these white friends.
You were
for
able
me,
to kind of move.
Yeah, because I loved everything. To this day, I have a huge palate for food, and I have a huge palate for life. Right? I love the mountains. I love the beach. I love, a nice golf course, and I'm okay with, hanging out. I used to be okay with hanging out at a dive bar, right? And I didn't really care.
Yeah.
So
you're currently living in Wheaton.
Still live in Wheaton.
That's about the whitest place I know.
Yes, it is.
Within 100 miles of Chicago.
Maybe Glen Ellen might give it a run for its money. Okay. Probably Hinsdale.
It's pretty close.
It's pretty close. We have some refugees from Somalia.
Oh, okay.
We do have African Americans.
Do you get coded as a refugee?
No. I don't look Ethiopian or Somalia. Yeah.
So tell me what it's like living out there.
It's great, man.
You love it?
It's great. So in the midst of learning how to navigate this world, being true to my values, I like the space. I love that I have paths to run on. I am a huge outdoor person, so I'm close to the Morton Arboretum, where I'm a member and have been for 8 years. And I like my amenities. I have to be honest. I'm spoiled. Starbucks, Costco, Trader Joe's. I love my amenities.
Got it.
So I compromise the diversity for the amenities, which I'm working on that. I'm thinking Oak Park is my move. I'm trying to keep my amenities and have more diversity. But as I said, 14 and a half months ago, things shifted. So
yeah, let's talk about that. What happened 15 months ago?
Awesome. Happy to talk about it. So I was introduced by my very, very dear friend, Gary, who I love. He said, "You got to go to Mankind Project." And I was like, what is all this about? He's like, if you got to get a scholarship, but you got to go to Mankind Project. Okay. It is life-changing. And I'm like, all right, I don't even know what this is all about, but sure, I'll sign up. So I called the center, the Chicago executive, and he got me in, and I signed up for August of 2018's MKP weekend. The weekend's called New Warrior Training Adventure. And on that weekend, the best way I can describe it is I made peace with little Charles. I stopped having a resentment towards God for being born on the wrong side of humanity. and I fully embraced all of me. In MKP we say shadow being Carl Jung, a big thing Carl Jung talks about, the shadow, things I want to repress, deny, hide behind, and where and how it comes out. And I brought all of that, all of me, good and bad, all of the defects of character, as we say around the tables of recovery, sin, if you will, if you want to say use Christianity. I looked at all the different parts of my life, and I fully integrated for the first time in my life. I became woke for the first time in my life, truly conscious of who I am, what I'm about, and what it is that I want to create for my life.
That's beautiful, Charles.
Thank you.
Sounds like an incredible weekend.
It was.
I should do one of those.
Yeah, you should.
So what does that mean for your racial identity? So we've talked about how you've felt comfortable around white folks. At times it's been harder, more complicated to be around black folks, and you became woke. What is woke for you?
So woke is understanding that I have choices, and I don't have to be resentful or angry at people groups, but rather I can embrace all of my heritage. In other words, I can be conscious of the life I want to create, which is to have my family, my African-American friends, and any new African-American black people that I meet on the journey to be in community with them, right? Because I was wounded and scarred, and I also had all of this programming messaging from my family, my parents, and even my aunts and uncles. I didn't have to listen to any of that, and I didn't have to believe any of that, and I could heal around that, and I could talk about it, to those who would listen about the healing that's taken place. I should back up and say I did a lot of therapy from 2010 to. And now I see her twice a year. My therapist, Holly, she's amazing.
Twice a year?
Twice a year now.
Wow.
I mean, maybe 3 times a year, but I used to go twice a month at least.
Got it.
So, and she's really elated that I did the Mankind Project. She encouraged it actually. So I don't have to, what that looks like being woke is that I am conscious of who I am and what I'm creating and what I want from my life. And I don't have to let story hold me back. And what I mean by story is the story I tell myself, the story people tell themselves, the story that the world tells us. That I can create my mission, that I can create a world of healing and safety by modeling vulnerability, compassion, kindness, and love.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. It's pretty awesome, actually. Yeah. It's freeing. I don't have to contemplate or premeditate or ponder or all the things you go through when you walk into a situation. I have the ability to be free, and I think that's actually the real word.
Yeah.
As I'm now free to be me.
To be you.
Free to be me. Yeah, that sums it up better. I had to get there to talk about it, but that's what it's been. The last 14 months, I've been free to be me. I mentioned to you, I've done some storytelling. I've gone to the mountains. Like, black men go to mountains? Yeah, black men go to mountains. I love the mountains. I don't know why. I just do. It works for me. And I love me some collard greens and black eyed peas, and I love me some watermelon and all the other stereotypes that the world might have for us. Yeah, sure, I love those things, but I am not those things, and I'm not these things. I'm just Charles. Period. You can't box me, right? And I shouldn't box you, and we shouldn't box each other. Yet with racism, we put you in a box and we say you have to be this way. And I'll give you an example. I was with a friend on Sunday. We were driving, and I was playing for her some music that I liked. I won't go into the group because I don't want to be judged. I mean, it doesn't matter. I was listening to the Avett Brothers, actually. I went to
Say who that?
The Avett Brothers. They're called the Avett Brothers.
You have to tell me who.
They're like this bluegrass, folksy, folk rock band. And I actually saw them in concert last month.
Avett Brothers.
Avett Brothers, right? So she's like, you like the Avett Brothers? I'm like, yeah, I like the Avett Brothers. And this is a woke woman. She has done a lot of spiritual work, teaches yoga, teaches, travels all around the world, right? And she asked me, she could not take her mind off of the box of this is a black man from the South Side and the South Burbs who was listening to a all white folk group. Actually, their bass player, he's Asian.
Okay,
but she couldn't. And she's a woke woman. She still cannot see. She couldn't see Charles in that moment. She was just like, this doesn't match. Why is a black man? Why I can? Yeah, I'm out of the box.
Yeah.
Right. And we do that all the damn time.
Right.
Black people do it to black people. Black people do it to white people. White people do it to black people. Asians do it to white people and black people.
Yeah.
Everyone's walking around with preconceived notions and these glasses that they're not, they're colored with whatever's on their mind or whatever their beliefs are.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's sad because it's not giving you the freedom to be who you are.
Yeah, there's that word freedom again. And I hear you have found your freedom.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
And,
Shay.
When I hear a black person say, I feel free.
Yeah.
That means something to me.
Yes. Yes, it does. It means something to me, too. It means that I no longer have to live in the morals and codes and the policies and the way I should be, or, Josh, when I was in the 6th or 7th grade, a guy named Roger Grossnickel, he's passed away, God bless him. He was a athletic coach and he was a bodybuilder, and he said, Charles, when you speak, you want to say yes, you don't want to say yeah. And he would give me all these other little life lessons because I internalized it as he thought my dad wasn't doing it right, right? Or my dad didn't have the right tools to teach a black boy how to assimilate into a white world. Well, if I say fucking yeah, I say fucking yeah, right? Yeah, gross nickel. I don't have to say yes. Sure, King's English is great. Proper English is great. But my dialect is my dialect, right? Where I grew up from, where I say, and I'll give you another story around that. So this is part of my journey. I remember the time in the I was at high school. It was high school. In my freshman year of high school, a guy named Buck. I won't even say his. We call him Bucky, so we'll just call him Buck. And he made fun of me because he's like, Chuck. I go by Chuck or Charles. He says, Chuck, what time is it? I say, it's 4 o'clock. Say 4 o'clock. 4 o'clock. I said, yeah, it's 4 o'clock. He says, and he made fun of me, and I was so mortified. I was embarrassed. I was like, oh, here I am at this white school. My blackness is coming out because I don't say the King's English 4 o'clock. I say 4, right? And here's how profound racism is. That night, Josh, I went home, and I said 4 about 100 times before I went to sleep. And in that moment, I had decided that I was going to speak the King's English language. I was going to enunciate and pronounce and use grammar to the best of my ability so that a white man couldn't call me out for, the words I pronounce, the grammar.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was hard. It was, and these are the things that we don't realize.
What feelings come up now when you share that story?
Sadness.
Yeah.
Sad that my friend, and he was a great guy. I love Bucky. He was a great guy. I see him on social media. He's got a family, beautiful family out in California. But it made me sad that I would have to, that I didn't use I didn't say 4, and I got made fun of for it. And I'm a sensitive person. I realize that. And by the way, it's okay to be sensitive. It's just, I don't want to internalize anymore as that I'm not worthy. Because that, in the bigger, we just to back up about this resentment towards God, that he would make white people worthy and all the rest of us were not worthy.
Yeah.
That's one of the resentments. Like, how the fuck did you make everybody else worthy and you didn't make us worthy?
Do you carry internalized depression?
Internalized oppression?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Do you still carry that with you?
I think it's a condition that I'm slowly growing out of.
You're slowly growing out of
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
I think MKP, Mankind Project,
Yeah.
was the starting point
Yeah.
of moving away from this internalized oppression to the freedom that I have been experiencing.
What remains with you of that internalized depression today?
My friend asking me that question about the music, right? It's
Okay.
like when they say it, I instantly get triggered. Like, oh fuck, I'm supposed to not be listening to the Avett Brothers, or this. In this, and I trust me. I. So people, you do your work, whatever it is, meet with your therapist, and or you do these weekends, and I don't think we ever. And shadow will always exist for us, I believe, personally. And what I mean by that, things we want to repress or deny, even if I've been healed around it. Because I guess my point is, in my estimation, Josh, I believe that scabs can be picked at, even if it's healed sometimes. And my friend bringing that up last weekend, she picked at it, and I was like, oh, I got a little triggered around it. Now. I'm not mad at her. I'm not resenting her. I actually called her this week and we chatted and like things are fine. Like I didn't walk around with resentment. So I guess what I'm trying to say is the internalized oppression can get triggered by events or things that are said, and I have to keep doing my work.
Got it.
Does that make sense?
Sure does, Charles.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I got one more question or set of questions for you, and then we'll take a look at the objects that you brought.
Sure.
To the meeting. So I had to ask Charles to bring a few objects or one object.
I brought 3.
Charles brought 3.
Sure.
But we were at we were somewhere together this summer.
Yes.
They had some intense dynamics around race.
That's correct.
And can you share a little bit about what that was like for you and what came from that for you?
Sure. Well, we had a facilitator lead a conversation around race, and it was one of the most powerful experiences I've ever had in my entire life.
So who was there and what was the conversation about?
This amazing man named Prodigy. G, we call him.
G.
Right? G. He led or facilitated this conversation, and it had to do with essentially a white person in the group dismissing another white person, and then that conversation being about racism. It just kind of bloomed from it blossomed from there, and it was amazing, right? And what I will say, what was amazing about it was that it got us to look at how white people dismiss not only other people, but African Americans, and how African Americans internalized or felt about it. And so we were able to share our feelings and talk openly about our struggle, being oppressed, conscious or unconscious. And the white people that were there were able to truly share from their vantage point their struggle of how unconscious they have, how unconscious their white privilege allows them to be white.
So what were some of the feelings that were shared by the black men?
The feelings that were shared by the black woman was anger, resentment, fear, sadness, deep sadness.
Do you remember some of the comments that were made?
Yeah. My comment was quit killing our little black boys. Quit killing our little black boys. That I held a prayer visual after the gentleman who was in the car with his girlfriend and the baby in back was killed. Philando Castro. Castillo.
Yep.
Beg your pardon. I held a prayer visual in the western suburbs, and it was a handful of black people and then mostly white friends of mine. But they came out to pray over our nation because I was so shook by that. And the other, the Trayvon Martins and the Rice kid and all these African American kids who've been killed, or African American men, and because even though it took 33 years for me to experience that kind of bias, that kind of racism, if you will, of the manager calling the cop just because I'm black, I felt it throughout all of these stories after that. That was 2009, and shit got worse.
Yeah.
Right? In the last 10 years, it's gotten worse than it ever was in my entire life. And I'm 43 years old.
Yep.
Right? That there are more blacks being killed than anyone else. So how that weekend that we were talking about, that conversation rather, that, we talked about, was powerful for black men to name their truth, and for white men to name their truth, and for us to bring about healing. And it was, as I said to you, it was, I felt completely at home expressing my blackness to white people.
Wow.
In a safe place.
Wow. So you got to be black with white people and black people.
Yes.
And not assimilate.
Not have to fucking assimilate.
So there's some anger there around all the assimilation you did.
I've worked hard at it.
At assimilating?
At assimilating.
Yeah.
Remember the whole 4 incident, right? I just said about 4,
yes,
right?
Absolutely.
And there are multiple things that I've done.
You worked really hard at doing that.
What was great about MKP for me, the Mankind Project experience that I went through in August of 2018, was I don't have to hustle anymore.
Yeah.
I have to hustle for your love, for the white man's love, for anyone's love. I'm love.
Yeah.
God is love and I'm love. That's powerful, brother.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Wow.
pretty great. Yeah.
Pretty great. Yeah. So I had asked Charles to bring an object with him.
Yes.
What did you bring?
I brought 3 items.
Okay, let's check it out.
Well, since we're talking about childhood,
Yeah.
I thought about this.
Okay.
All right. So I brought my 1983 Hickory Bend yearbook from Glenwood, Illinois.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I knew we were going to be talking about
what grade is that?
I was in the 2nd grade in 1983, 84. You might remember it was the San Francisco 49ers, I think, that won the Super Bowl that year, I want to say. I think they won.
Bears. No, I don't.
The Bears won 85. But the Bears were in the playoffs.
Oh, okay.
I think it was Ditka's 2nd or 3rd year. But by the way, I don't even watch football anymore.
Okay.
I stopped watching pro football.
Because
I was staying with Colin Kaepernick. I stand for racial equality, for police brutality to be reduced big time. So, but anyways, we're talking about Bears. But I was in the 2nd grade, and I'm that guy. And if you look at my class, again,
it's pretty diverse.
I
I see a lot of black faces there.
So a lot of black faces. That's Alex Torres. Alejandro, he goes by now, but he went by Alex. He shortened it. He was from Jamaica. His parents are from Jamaica. And I don't see if Bethley is on here. But this was a pretty diverse class. I mean, you had, in my 2nd grade class, I think it was a total of 22 kids, and about 7 of us are black. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 of us are people of color out of 22, right? But these were the formative years of where I got called these names, I got made fun of, and yet I had white friends. Guys like Mike Barnolini, who I played baseball with, and Duran Stewart, my buddy here, Duran. It's funny to see these people on Facebook nowadays. So that's my first object, and I just wanted to show kind of where I grew up
Thank you, Charles. Yeah. Wow. It's beautiful. What else you got?
So I ran the 2010 marathon, and I couldn't find a medal. But I did find my 2017 Chicago Marathon. I've run 3. 2010 in Chicago, 2017. I know, nuts.
I mean, that's the willpower you were talking about earlier.
That's correct. Yeah. That's correct. So I brought the 40th anniversary of the Chicago Marathon. And what's great about this is this was right a year almost 10 months before I did Mankind Project.
Okay.
And so what this symbolizes, I guess, if you will, or the object of it is that I was still hustling.
For the love.
For the love.
Yeah.
I was still hustling, you know. Now I do races just because. In the last year, I've done a handful of races, but I'm not trying to, you know, impress anyone, or I'm not running from anyone. I'm not running to anyone. I'm just running because I love running. It's pretty great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is a symbol I'm hearing of the internalized depression you were carrying.
Yes. So, yeah. And what's great about it is I raised like $2,000 for a charity. Ran with my friend who she raised like $4,000 or $5,000 for a charity. So good came out of,
absolutely,
you know, but I don't have to run anymore.
Yeah.
It was just, or I don't have to prove anymore.
Yeah.
I can keep running, but not have to prove it anymore. Yeah, prove it after I run after this dinner we had. And the last thing was, you're familiar with this?
What is that?
That is a talisman from my weekend, my Mankind weekend, right? And this symbolizes the freedom and the consciousness that I am now an initiated man, a woke man, a man who has a mission, who has goals, and is free to live out that mission. It's pretty awesome. So, yeah.
Thank you, Charles.
You're welcome.
Well, I really appreciate you coming here,
You're welcome.
doing this first run of the new podcast. And I want to honor you for being vulnerable and sharing your story, sharing yourself.
Thank you.
And for all the work you've put in to become free.
Thank you. Thank you. I honor you, brother.
Thank you.
Yeah, blessings.